Chapter 5. A week later, Owen arrived at Torchwood 4 with Jack. After a little hostility to his presence, Mallory let them both into the living room. A giant frame dominated the room, holding what looked like a Dogon eye. "Now, I will wait here, Owen will check you over." "Okay," Mallory said, going beyond the living room's farther door. "I just need to calibrate the optics on the eye so it has time to learn to parallax with the second." Her words spilled out over the threshold as the subject of Jack's sentence stood there, distractedly rubbing his hair and looking around. He fixed her with a look before nodding, and replying, brusque, laconic, hoping to get this all over quickly. "Yep, as stated. Owen," he clarified, as he watched the bizarre woman look past him, over his head, down the lane and finally, back to his face. "Then, please go on." She held the door that led down the hall to her bedroom. "I must remember," Mallory said to herself as Owen stepped past her. "Remember what? Tea? Or coffee? Can I get you something?" "Just let's get this over with," Owen replied, bluntly. However, Mallory did not seem to notice. "I am sorry that my social conventions don't fit with yours," she said. She sat on the bed, her 1980s cocktail dress crumpling around her middle. In these days of retro, however, the neon orange flip-flops went well. "I could do with taking you up the hospital and getting you under a CT, or MRI scanner," Owen said, placing his hands around her head. "Which one?" asked Mallory. Brushing his hands away, she opened the drawer nearest to her in her chest of drawers, pulling put images and traces, a pile at least an inch thick. Looking at the first, she leafed through the rest. "Which do you prefer? I have ... CT, MRI, NA, spectrophotometer, plural, absorption and emission." "Let's have a look." Owen held out his hand, his eye lighting on the drawer from which she had taken the traces, which also contained tiny handheld devices. He looked through them, narrowing his eyes. "You can't be serious," he intoned, still scanning them. "Why? I made them." Owen picked up the MRI again. "The projection, the results ... all processed," he murmured. "I've tried them all on myself. The CT is next door. The MRI in the reception room at the back." "You have an MRI?" "No," Owen instructed. "I believe you. I can find them," he added. "You put your feet up. I need to look at these again." Owen closed Mallory's bedroom door, still looking at the image traces as he strode back to Jack. "Did you know Mallory has hospital instruments back there?" Owen asked. Jack stood up, grinning. "Nothing would surprise me with Mallory," he replied, striding over to Owen. "Hey, what you got there?" Owen looked up from the HPLC analysis of Mallory's blood plasma. He showed Jack. "And they mean?" "She's getting old, Jack," Owen replied, not looking up. "Her brain does not function as well as it used to. She's been analyzing herself for years." "Is it bad?" "Put it like this, if Mallory were a kitten she'd just stare at the ball of wool and would never think of playing with it. Except the kitten would be too busy with multi-quantized mathematics and wouldn't even have noticed there was wool." "Mallory!" Jack exclaimed. "Come on," Owen insisted. "Show me your CT scanner. I have an idea. Jack, stay here," he added, pointing between Hi and Mallory. "Doctor-patient." The instrument was indeed hospital grade. The detector sat next to a computer attached to the mainframe. Owen gestured to Mallory to unlock it, and he quickly pulled up the program. "I've inverted the scanner," Owen explained. "I want images of this room, so I can subtract from your latest one. They should match. But, if not..." Mallory said nothing as Owen inputted the information system's parameters. He gestured towards the stretcher, the hollow, circular scanner at the end by the wall. But she didn't move. "Your head, does it hurt? Or the treatment?" he proposed. "It doesn't hurt, or rather, conventional ones don't. Give me a second. Lie down. Keep your clothes on," he added, as Mallory fussed with her cocktail dress. Minutes later and Owen was sitting down next to her. Your brain seems to functioning okay. I'll check up next week to see if there's any change. You're coming back, said Mallory, disappointment in her voice. Yeah? For now, I have a nerve paralyzer. If you let me, it will stop any stress on your brain. Okay, Mallory nodded. Yes, I recognize it. You again? She dipped her head. Owen smiled. Is there anything you haven't invented? A few things. The direction finder. That was Torchwood 1, Matilda Hodinett. She also made the portable prison cell. I'm working on an improvement to its range and battery life. She shuffled next to Owen. The invisible lift, that was Jack himself, at Torchwood 3. And the organic computer. She just seemed to evolve. And then, there's the life glove, Mallory added, her face serious. Owen thought she looked scared. But I told Susie I didn't know how it worked. Mallory looked away. I didn't like her. I upped the security in the end and pretended I wasn't in. Owen suppressed a laugh at the thought of his ex-lover trying in vain to get in, to hassle Mallory over the glove, with which she was obsessed. Oh, and the intelligent paper, that was also Matilda Hodinett. All right, Owen held up his hand now, sit still. Let me brush your hair. Like Jack, said Mallory, suddenly. What? But she didn't reply, just waited as Owen took out her hair grips, her pale gold hair falling like a waterfall behind her back. In your room, yes? Mallory nodded. He was back within a minute, pulling the brush through her hair. When it was smooth, he used his fingertips to locate the right place to make the injection. This will hurt, but not for long. And it will help with the headaches. The injections were tiny, and he moved from place to place around her scalp. Mallory closed her eyes. All done, said Owen, at last. Mallory still had her eyes closed. You can open them, Owen tried again. May I take your hand? Asked Mallory, eyes still closed. He reached one over, which she took in hers. Malort felt his finger joints, before dropping it and reaching for the other. You have a bone in your thumb 1/2 millimeter shorter than the other, Mallory concluded, opening her eyes. Here. She raised his right hand. Messy handwriting. And you can tell all that from my hands? I can tell all that from, Mallory began, but her own hand shot to her head. Is it supposed to be burning? It may, conceded Owen. Lie up in bed. I'll get you a drink. He helped Mallory to her bed, her hands going to her head as the injections took effect. If I can find anything in this kitchen, he thought, a few minutes later. Old kitchen, no fridge or freezer. Frosted melamine cupboards. Strange food in the cupboard, tin tongue, arrowroot biscuits. Finally, Owen located a kettle which needed to be put over a gas ring to boil water, and made tea. Handing one to Jack, he returned and sat by Mallory, who had gone to sleep, flicking on the portable mainframe and moving it over her cranium. She was no longer in pain. Good. They could go. 88,888,888. Did she take all her clothes off? Gwen's words were the first thing she said as Owen and Jack walked through the airlock. Nice opens, replied Owen. I just did what I was supposed to do and left. He saw Ianto's shoulders sag, before sidling up to Gwen, slapping a note into her hand. Ianto. Betting on that? He expected it of Gwen, but not him. Gwen, Ianto, boardroom, Jack ordered. Now. He added, as Gwen raised her eyebrows in surprise. As the inner and outer door vlised, Tosh sidled up to Owen. Kitchen? She asked. Owen nodded. It's where they all went if they wanted to confide something to someone else, get it off their chest, move on. She's an ill woman all right, Owen told her. I don't know what's wrong, not yet. Just left her comfortable. It's all I could do. And is she as strange as when we met her? Tosh asked, innocently. Owen was about to tear off a strip, but then relented. She's retro, sad retro, living in the past. Like, today means nothing to her. She's surrounded by tech that most people couldn't even dream of, but her kitchen's out of the 1940s, right down to the metal bucket with ice in it to cool the milk. And, she had a cocktail dress on today with flared trousers and flip-flops. Tosh showed him the cover of the magazine she was reading. Owen's eyes widened. That's it exactly. Right down to the orange shoes. What's wrong with that? Owen didn't answer. Then he saw Jack, standing at the kitchen entrance. What about our Meditech, Owen? His hands went to his hips. Did you tell Tosh about that? It's far in advance of our own. Owen continued, eyes lighting up, ignoring Jack's barb. She made it. The resolution on it is better than I've ever seen. Except, he rounded on Jack. Her DNA test. Holding out a page with black stripes on it, Owen pointed to sections of it at a time. Is this hers? Jack nodded. Then she's not human. Look here. He bowed his head and pointed to a section towards the left. No quarter markers, and look, extra lines here, here. You don't have it upside down? Jack's hostile tone made Owen pull up sharply. He narrowed his eyes and shook his head. No. Either this is not her DNA analysis, or she is alien. Who's alien? Asked Gwen, looking suitably sheepish. Mallory, Owen clarified. As I said before, Jack said, she is one of us. Be respectful. You know, I think I remember something of the Wren program, Ianto mused. What do you remember, Ianto? Tosh asked. About Mallory's mother, Wren. She grew up with the Torchwood 1 staff parenting her. She learned everything as she was supposed to, and was beyond genius. So many things accredited to others at one were really Wren. He bit his lip. They wanted to see if, as an adult, she was capable of being a weapon, a sociopath who could slip into political or social situations, could disable, disarm, kill without remorse, without emotion. After the First World War, every country on Earth was looking for the edge in case more war broke out in Europe. Eugenics, Owen murmured. And she ran away with the co-founder of Torchwood 4, Gwen chipped in. She was resentful of her upbringing, Jack said at last, folding his arms. The others fell silent, their own theories about Wren. I once told you that Torchwood 4 was lost. He looked pointedly across to Gwen. What you need to know is that it is lost, not because it was destroyed, but because it is mobile, it is ambient. He pulled himself away from Wall and began to pace between them there in the kitchen. Roderick knew he had to hide Wren from Torchwood 1. Wren continued with her work, fixing the retcon molecule design that Roddy had been working on for so long. They were happy, and they had Mallory. Wren worried about her daughter because of her own upbringing. She asked Roderick to fix Torchwood 4 somewhere so Mallory could go to school, to have the normal life she didn't. Of course, Roderick did so. At the crossroads at 2 Roman roads, 2 veins of rift activity. She continued to report back pretending to Torchwood 1 she was still carrying out its ordered. But one day, she got too near to the rift. And disappeared. Jack shot Tosh a look. And was killed by something that had chosen that moment to travel through it to Earth. But, here's the thing, she died in 1962. So? Gwen prompted. Mallory was born in 1977, Tosh replied, then shrugged, defensively. I listen, she added. So, Gwen mused, Wren got back? Or she was brought back? Roderick met Wren in 1941, and they ran away, eloped, from Torchwood 1 back to Birmingham, a huge center of munitions manufacture in the war. It was hell. Close to a rift line. It was a crazy place to position Torchwood 4. And then Wren got pregnant. Poor woman, said Gwen, to lose a child so young. She didn't lose the child, Jack said, slowly. That child was Mallory. So, Mallory lost her mother. And became ... like she is now? Tosh screwed up her eyes, trying to piece together everything Jack had just told them. But Mallory was born in 1977, Gwen said, glancing at Tosh. How can the child born in the war also be born in the 70s? How indeed, Jack smiled, enjoying them puzzling over it all. And Mallory? She grew up without a mum? Owen asked. with the dad. Roderick did everything Ren wanted for her. Jack looked across to Owen. But, Owen prompted. But what? Jack asked. Well, it sounds like the part of the story that you'll say but. No. Jack grinned wider. Unless you are offering, Owen Harper. Owen rolled his eyes. So, she was born both in 1942 and in 1966, in Torchwood 4, lost, hidden. And just lives there, on her own, developing Torchwood tech. Away from the prying eyes of Unit, Jack nodded. To Mallory, Unit are the enemy. Or were, before she met Mark. Mark? Gwen asked. Haven't you been listening? Mark is Mallory's husband, said Tosh. Was, corrected Jack. And she was doing well, too, got a job as a teacher. They were happy. But she was sad how she had left it with her dad, and couldn't leave behind her life. In her spare time she redesigned and reprogrammed that human interface. Then Mark succumbed to an accident. Unit? Tosh asked. Clever, Jack praised. Certainly, that's what Mallory believed. She called Roderick and told him everything. He took them back in. Father and daughter made up. Then, Roderick found out her husband was from Unit via Torchwood 1 and was angry, thought they were trying to get to Mallory, because of Ren. But Mark was no threat, he was too injured from a fall. His brain staved in. Nerve damage meant he could not walk, could not control his bowels and bladder. So she fixed him? Or her dad did? Owen asked, remembering about the tech. No, she didn't. She took over from Roderick at Torchwood 4, after he too sickened. Cancer. Nursed him as well as Mark. A young woman doing all that on her own? Gwen asked. Why not? She is a brilliant young woman. The only time I've ever seen her low was when she had to give Mark over to Unit for specialist care. And what happened to him? Tosh asked. Died. Nobody could take what he's had, plasma lasers. Though he avoided most of those, but fell from a 30-story building. Unit were mad that Torchwood had involved themselves with one of their own. And then Mallory had to conceal Torchwood 4, which did not concern her much. She doesn't do people. And Unit would give their eye teeth to know where Torchwood 4 is. Isn't she lonely? Asked Gwen. No, Jack shook his head. But she's on her own. Ah, you are confusing alone for lonely. She is alone. And she is getting those strange headaches. Owen added. Yes, she has taken on too much. Or she has left Torchwood 4 static too long and the rift energy is affecting her, because of. Jack broke off abruptly. Anyway, I've told her to move it. But she likes the garden too much, it reminds her too much of her mother. Her mother who she never knew and died 15 years before Mallory was born? Owen asked. Yes, said Jack. You know what the rift is like. Time is not linear, sometimes it acts like a ball of string, different times touching different places. Like with Tommy, Toshiko put in, suddenly. And like the dance hall building. Ianto added. There was a pause. Billis, said Gwen, simply. He did that. Was doing that, bling up time. He was using the rift. So, Mallory is dangerous? You think Billis was dangerous? Well, of course he was dangerous, Jack, Owen said, impatiently, ruffling his hair. He trapped you and Tosh. He unleashed the Great Devourer. He was once very much part of T4, Jack said, a field agent. Roderick sent out half a dozen or so of them, to live along the rift, to carry out experiments and report back. When he wasn't recalled, he stayed in Cardiff. Then found out about us. So, is that what Mallory does, process the field reports? Asked Gwen. Jack said nothing. What? It's not my business. But I do pop my head in now and again to check up on her. Then, have a word, Jack, said Owen, I mean, a miniskirt, tartan shirt and army boots. He remembered his visit the week before. You have a word, Owen, Jack retorted. Explain to her why it is important to follow strict fashion mores to fulfill your expectations of her. Burned. Ianto put in. I don't care what you say, Owen finished, pointing around at Jack, Ianto, Tosh, and Gwen. She's weird. She ''s ... unconventional, said Toshiko, thoughtfully. If she never goes out, what does it matter? Well, give us a fashion update Friday, said Gwen. Owen raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Your follow-up appointment, Dr. Harper? Fuck. Owen exclaimed, spirits dashed. No, Jack, she'll be okay, she'll. You'll go, Jack warned. You said she was your patient. Anyway, she's like us. We owe it to people like us. But unlike us, she is alone. Keep her alive, we don't know when we'll need her. Give us an update on the weirdness, Gwen whispered, chuckling as Owen passed her. He said nothing, instead rolled his eyes in impatience and gave Jack an angry look as their leader made his way to inspect the generator.